Amateur Traveler is in its 20th year now, but can you imagine if I had people on the show who had never been to the destination but had just read about it or seen a movie about it? That wouldn't make any sense at all, and you wouldn't listen. We all know how important it is to receive advice from people who know a destination to get the most authentic local experience. And a great option for experiencing this is Explore Worldwide and their authentic small group adventures, led by local tour leaders, perfect for solo travelers who want to meet like minded people with a desire for adventure. I'm often an independent traveler, but two of my last three trips were with small group tours because they organize everything and it's a lot easier. If you want to recreate the tour I did to Malta, they have a Malta and Gozo Discovery Tour. I'm intrigued by one of their tours called A Taste of Sicily. The company again is Explore Worldwide, and visit exploreworldwide.com to learn more. And thanks to Explore Worldwide for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler. The nights are long, the days are short, and the weather is chilly to downright cold, depending on where you are. It's a good time to slip into a Quince iconic Mongolian cashmere sweaters, which start at only $50. You can treat yourself to everyday luxury at an affordable price with Quince. If you really want to dive into luxury, you can check out their leather handbags, washable silk shirts, and European linen sheet sets. Whatever you're looking for at Quince, all the prices are 50 to 80% less than similar brands, and they do that by partnering directly with top factories and cutting out the middleman. They only work with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing processes. And of course, they use premium fabrics and finishes for that luxury feel in every piece. But you've already heard me rave about my Quince travel pants. Treat yourself this winter without the luxury price tag. Go to quince.com/traveler for 365-day returns plus free shipping on your order. That's QUINCE.com/traveler to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/traveler. And thanks to Quince for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler.
I got my bags packed on a roll. I'm heading out there and I'm ready to go. I'm looking real good in my passport photo. Oh, no.
Amateur Traveler, episode 765. Today, the Amateur Traveler talks about cabins and waterfalls, rivers and lochs, mountains and fiddlers as we drive the Blue Ridge Parkway.
I know that I should be heading home, but maybe not today.
Welcome to the Amateur Traveler. I'm your host, Chris Christensen. Let's talk about the Blue Ridge Parkway. I'd like to welcome back to the show Brett Love from greenglobaltravel.com and the Blue Ridge Mountains Travel Guide.com. And Brett has come back to the show to talk about the Blue Ridge Parkway. Brett, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me, Chris. Always a pleasure.
And I say welcome back. As far as we know, Brett has been on once before talking about West Sweden, but it's possible he's been on more than that. I've known Brett for a while. So, Brett, what is your connection to the Blue Ridge Parkway?
Back before the pandemic happened, my lady Mary Gabbett and I, who are partners in Green Global Travel, we have decided that we want to move to the mountains, and we really started the Blue Ridge Mountains Travel Guide as a way to explore the Blue Ridge region, which stretches, of course, from North Georgia to southern Pennsylvania, for those who don't know, and explore it in search of our next home and also learn more about this region as we went. And so one of the first things we wanted to do once travel was allowed again was to do a big Blue Ridge Parkway road trip. And we did our first one last year, and we've since done various sections of it, some of them 2 or 3 times, some of them just once, but we have since traveled the entire length of the Parkway and just really love it. And I'm planning on going back again in October.
Excellent. Well, I think that leads us into you put it on a map already, so why should someone go to the Blue Ridge Parkway?
For those who don't know, just a little bit of history, FDR basically came up with the concept of connecting Great Smoky Mountains National Park in North Carolina with Shenandoah National Park in Virginia, using this amazing 469-mile or so highway that was really one of the first, in my opinion, truly great conservation initiatives to really preserve the wilderness of eastern United States in a way that when you go there today and you realize how much development there is outside of this fairly small geographical area, it's really remarkable to just see, other than this road that has no real hotels, no real commerce, no real restaurants or gas stations or anything. It's just unspoiled beauty for 469 miles. How can you not love that? To me, it's just, it's classic Americana. And we talk on our Blue Ridge Mountains travel guide site, we talk about this idea of rediscovering small town America, but it's also sort of a glimpse of what America was kind of before the Industrial Revolution and all of these things altered the landscape and created these vast metropolises, which to me is something everybody is craving right now. And it just so happens to be the number one unit of the National Park Service in the United States with 15 million annual visitors. So I feel like it's kind of a popular opinion, not an unpopular opinion.
Well, a couple of things there, clarification. So when you say the number one unit, you're talking about Great Smoky Mountains National Park specifically?
No. No,
because that is what I see as the number one park unit in the U.S.
Different. That's different. The Great Smoky Mountains National Park is the number one national park with 12 to 13 million annual visitors.
Got it.
But because the Blue Ridge Parkway is overseen by the National Park Service, it is actually the most visited unit of the National Park Service.
Got it. Okay. And then one other clarification. You mentioned connecting Great Smoky Mountains with Shenandoah National Park. And there are two roads that come together right at the southern end of Shenandoah.
Right.
Are you counting Skyline Drive in Shenandoah National Park as part of the mileage when you give the mileage for the...
No.
Okay.
No.
Even though really they do connect.
Yes, right.
And
yeah,
they're very similar.
Same road, but because they have different names and are operated differently, they're technically separate. But we started at the top of Shenandoah in Skyline Drive and went all the way south and then onto the Parkway. And I mean, it's really just the same stunning landscape on either side.
Right. Well, the other thing there in terms of giving people some idea for the scale, we're going to talk about places to stop and things to do, but if I just wanted to power through and drive, it's going to take me roughly 9 hours to drive the Blue Ridge Parkway and another 3 to drive Shenandoah Skyline Drive. Is that about right?
I don't know. I've read 15 for the whole thing for the 500 miles, but I mean, honestly, I can't imagine trying to do it all in one stretch. And it's, because the speed limit, I can't remember. I think it's 35 miles per hour. It's pretty
something
slow.
like that. Yeah, a little slower in Skyline Drive.
It is not meant for speed. It's meant for meandering and like soaking it in. And, there's 200 overlooks along the way. So there's a lot of places you're going to want to stop and get out. So for me, you could probably do it in a really long day if you wanted to, but why in the heck would you want to?
I don't know that you could, honestly. So we just did the northern part of that. I was up in D.C. with my daughter, and we went down to Asheville, and we drove, down Skyline Drive for one day or for, half a day, including some hikes, and then drove the northern third of the Blue Ridge Parkway, and then at that point we needed to make some distance, and so we got off the Blue Ridge and then went down to Asheville. But excellent. So where are you going to start us, in the north or the south here?
You pick. You're the host.
Oh, well, let's start in the north and go south then.
Okay. So what do you want to know?
What kind of itinerary are you going to lay out for us? What do you recommend that we do? So we're not going to just power through it. So we're going to make some stops. What are we going to stop? What are we going to see? What are we going to do?
Well, what we do and what we like to do is we like to set a certain amount, usually I'd say we tend to do between 50 and 80 miles of the Parkway in a day.
Okay.
And we do a lot of stops. And we don't do a ton of the long hikes, but we try to do some of the short waterfall hikes and things like that. So we might do, for instance, I'll go with the Asheville area because that's the area we've driven multiple times.
Sure.
We might drive from Asheville north to Banner Elk, Blowing Rock, Grandfather Mountain State Park, all of that stuff. We might do that in a day, but it's a long, busy day, just that short stretch. It's probably 50 to 80 miles. But from Virginia, what we're looking at doing, we did drive the entire Virginia section in one day. I don't recommend it.
That's a long day.
But we had to because of the itinerary we were doing. We had to make time. But what we are planning on doing when we go back in October is we're probably going to start just outside of Roanoke, and we're going to head up from there to the Lexington, Virginia area, which has a town of Buena Vista and Natural Bridge is around there. We'll probably spend the night in Lexington or Buena Vista, keep going the next day and go a little further north to just south of Skyline Drive and spend the night there, and then keep going up the next day and finish the Parkway and then possibly head back up into Shenandoah National Park again. So that's kind of how we would break it up, is maybe do each state. I think you could break it up into thirds and really immerse yourself in that 1/3 each day and really get a good feel for it. But you can also drive it all in one day if you really just want to see the sights and not do any hikes or anything like that.
I think we're going to recommend that you stop and do some hikes. So
yes,
if we start at the north end arbitrarily here, anything you want to do in the area before we get on? So the Parkway starts in Afton. Anything you want to do near Afton before we do anything?
There is a place that we wanted to hike, but we did not have time. Humpback Rocks is actually part of the Appalachian Trail, I believe. And they've got a farm museum trail at the Humpback Rocks Visitor Center. There's part of the Appalachian Trail that you can access from the Humpback Gap parking area, and the views from there are supposed to be spectacular.
So this is just 5.9 miles into the Parkway from the northern. One thing before we do that, I want to make a suggestion that while you're in the area, I would make a little stop in Stanton, Virginia. I want to say Staunton because it's spelled that way. We spent the night in the area in between Blue Ridge Parkway and the Skyline Drive in Shenandoah National Park. And Stanton is a lovely little town. There's an old car dealer with vintage cars in the downtown. There's Woodrow Wilson's Presidential Library in there, which is a nice little museum, which we visited. He's an interesting guy. There's some contradictions for sure. When you talk about a Southerner from his time period, he is both progressive for his time and regressive to us in terms of civil rights potentially at the same time. But it was a very interesting museum to kind of see where he came from in the political landscape and what he did.
Yeah, we spent the night in Stanton, but we had no time to explore. That was when we were heading up. And then we came back down Skyline Drive, so we went straight from Skyline Drive onto the Parkway.
Well, and you mentioned that the Mountain Farm Trail there at Humpback Visitor Center was right along the Appalachian Trail, and you're going to find that a number of these different places are weaving in and out where you're hiking a mile on the Appalachian Trail to go to this particular view. So the Appalachian Trail is basically running along this ridge that you're driving along at this particular point.
Absolutely. And there's even a couple of places we stopped to have lunch when we were in the North Carolina portion where literally the trail went right by our picnic table.
Right.
So we were seeing through hikers coming right by our picnic tables, which was great.
Cool. What's the next stop you're going to recommend?
There's a few that we haven't done that
Hmm.
I would like to do the next time that would include the White Rock Falls Trail. We're big waterfall
Hmm.
hikers, so we'll almost always stop for a waterfall hike when we have time. Yankee Horse, there's a logging railroad exhibit and a small waterfall there. The one that we really spent a lot of time at on our last trip was the Otter Creek and Otter Lake overlooks.
Okay.
There's a lot of good hikes around there along the creeks that go at the Otter Creek campground. And then the Otter Lake, there's a trail that goes all the way around this little beautiful lake that has a little waterfall over the dam kind of thing.
And you say the dam, you're right there at the James River. So this is the river that's going to flow down to Yorktown and Williamsburg and all that direction. But it's getting a start up here in this part of Virginia.
Yeah, and James River, they've also got canal locks there that you can walk.
We did those. Yeah, at the James River Trail. It was very interesting to go walk over to the old canal locks there. You cross over the river on a nice pedestrian bridge that's built underneath the highway bridge, so you're not dodging the traffic as you do it, to this set of locks that was built to make the James River more navigable back in the days before railroads.
And if you got any photographers in the audience, the James River Bridge that you're talking about over to the locks, that's one of the best places on the Blue Ridge Parkway I've seen for photos because the river is fairly still and the reflections of the sky there in the water are just phenomenal.
Excellent. So we're about milepost 63 when we're at the James River Trail. Anything else we want to do in that first section of things?
First section, nope. I think that's the majority of the things we did in the first section.
Is the Big Meadows there, or am I in the wrong?
No, Big Meadows is in Shenandoah Park.
Okay, so that's what I couldn't remember. We did the back to back.
Yeah, that's where we stayed was the Big Meadows Lodge, and there's actually a picnic area near there that also had the Appalachian Trail running right beside it. I think it was called Panorama or something like that. Cascades, I can't remember. So many places.
Okay. It doesn't make for great audio when we're doing a lot of hand waving here, Brett.
Well, there is, speaking of cascades, there is the Falling Water Cascades Trail at mile 83.1 that it's a national recreation trail, and there's a loop to the view of the Cascades, which is really cool.
Okay. Where to next?
Well, my favorite overlooks in Virginia are actually closer to the southern sections when you get past Buena Vista and the Otter Creek overlooks. There's actually 4 Otter Creek overlooks before you get to the Otter Lake overlook, and each of them has places where you can hike along this creek, which is about, I don't know, maybe it's a pretty wide creek. It's about 25 feet wide. They've got some really nice picturesque bridges that you can go across. It's kind of interesting because there's not a lot of places on the Parkway where there are water features right beside the road. So this little section, which goes from about mile 57.6 down to 62.5, the water is pretty much right by the road. So I thought that was interesting for me. And then as we were discussing before, the Otter Lake, which is at 63.1, it's another place where the water is right there. I think really Otter Lake and the James River are the only 2 places where you can actually see water from the road as you're driving.
Now, Otter Lake, if I've got the right place, there's actually a lodge at Otter Lake and places to stay there as well.
Not on the one that we were at. It's a very, very small lake. There is a lodge in that area, but it's not actually on the lake. It's a very small one.
Okay.
It does have the little waterfall at the bottom, and Otter Creek keeps going. Like you said, it feeds into the James River. But the lake itself is, like I said, I think it's a 1-mile trail that you can walk around.
Okay. It's the Peaks of Otter Lodge.
That's different.
Okay, that's different. Okay.
Yeah, that's different. Yeah, Peaks of Otter Lodge is one of the few lodges
Right.
that you can actually see from the entire. There's the one in Little Switzerland, North Carolina, just skipping around a little bit here, but then Peaks of Otter Lodge is also right off the Parkway. So it's one of the few hotels you can actually see from the Parkway.
Got it.
And then if you want to go further south from that, you get to some of my favorite. The terrain, when you're in the northern section of Virginia, you're getting that classic sort of Blue Ridge Mountains terrain. But as you get a little further south, you're getting into much lower elevations, particularly as compared to the North Carolina section, which is extremely high elevations. You get into
for an Easterner, you mean?
Well, yeah. I mean, 6,000 feet, which is the highest point east of the Mississippi for Mount Mitchell. But in Virginia, you're basically not very high above sea level. You've got rolling farmland.
Mm-hmm.
You get to places like the Great Valley Overlook, where you're seeing more what I think of as sort of typical southern farmland landscapes, as opposed to those dynamic mountains that you get in North Carolina. So it really goes through a lot of interesting changes as we get further south, heading towards the Roanoke Valley and some of the southern overlooks.
Okay.
But I don't think that the lack of the dynamic mountains, I think that actually kind of makes it more interesting, because then you get to the places like the Groundhog Meadow overlook, where they've got this really beautiful wooden observation tower that you can climb up. And it's really cool because it's got these like windows built into it, and it almost provides this sort of natural frame for the mountains that you can see in the distance. I'm kind of a history geek, and I really like that they have all of these different traditional Appalachian fencing styles that you can see.
Okay.
Natural fencing with no use of nails or anything like that. And I think they have 4 or 5 different styles that were used by traditional Appalachian people all around this meadow. And that's a really cool place to get out, take photos, and there's often, as the name would seem to indicate, there's often wildlife that you can see in that area, deer and groundhogs and stuff like that.
Got it.
Ah bon chien. Bonjour, je suis Theo, a tour leader with Explore, and this is Punti. He's helping us find truffles under the trees next to this beautiful vineyard. Maybe for tomorrow's cooking class? Oui, call semi-heure. Parfait. Semi-o'clock. Not everyone gets to enjoy a Bordeaux sunset this way, but you will if you explore. No, Punti. Search exploreworldwide.com and don't just travel. Explore.
Don't miss out on the last few weeks of football action with Prize Picks, the best place to win cash while watching the playoffs. The app is simple. Pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. Download the Prize Picks Daily Fantasy Sports app today and use code FIELD and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code FIELD on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks, run your game. Must be present in certain states. Visit prizepicks.com for restrictions and details.
Moving south from there's a couple of really cool cabins that we like. Keeping with the history section, there's the Puckett Cabin, which, if I'm not mistaken, is the one that was used by a midwife in the area who was very well known. I think her last name was Puckett. And she apparently delivered more than 1,000 babies in this area. So they've kept her cabin, which I believe is from the early 1900s. They've kept it there, and it's got also the traditional fencing around it. And it's really cool. And there's another cabin that we really enjoyed called I'm not going to pronounce this right, but it's spelled like Brinegar, Brinegar cabin. And it's kind of on the side of this hill overlooking this unbelievable, just the classic Blue Ridge Mountains landscape.
And you say classic Blue Ridge Mountains landscape. We probably should have talked about that before now. What is a classic Blue Ridge? What am I seeing as I'm doing all these overlooks along this way?
Well, the Blue Ridge Mountains are rolling hills, basically, But what makes them unique is that the leaves on these mountains, they give off, what's the word I'm looking for? The green stuff.
Pollen.
No,
The green stuff.
that's funny, but no. I'm trying to think of the scientific term. But basically, as the heat from the sun makes the moisture on the leaves and in the air evaporate, they give off a haze.
Right.
And the haze that rolls over the mountains is what gives them this sort of bluish hue that is unique to this part of the country. So when I say Blue Ridge Mountains, they are literally blue, hazy, sort of have a mystical sort of vibe to them because of this gas that's being released from the leaves.
Okay. Well, and the way I would describe it is you've got the rounded hills tend to be rather than real pointy mountains, and there's always another hill behind that, another hill behind that, until it basically fades into blue in the distance, and everything heavily forested.
And what's interesting is the whole Appalachian range of which the Blue Ridge Mountains are a part. It's one of the oldest mountain ranges in the world. Mm-hmm. And so those rounded hills you're talking about, at one point, these were larger and more jagged and had that sort of Rocky Mountain appearance.
Oh, sure.
But time has, because they're literally so old that they've been worn down by time, and that's why they have that distinctive sort of rounded top as opposed to the dynamic jagged peaks you might expect out west.
Yeah, well, and these used to be probably as tall as the Himalayas first created, but it's been a while.
It has been a long while. That's part of what makes them so special, and still, even despite all of that, they're still the tallest mountains east of the Mississippi. So you have a lot of different unique aspects that makes them special.
Well, and then that also affects the road is... I don't know if there are 100 feet of straight road on the Parkway.
Not. And I think that's one reason you'll see a lot of motorcyclists, which I understand. They like the challenge of the curves. The one I don't understand is all the actual cyclists you see. You see people on bikes.
Amazing number of cyclists,
It's crazy. And I'm like...
Because it's all hills.
Yeah. And it's like, go you, I'm very happy for you. But, man, sometimes the situation gets a little hairy where bikes are coming this way and cars are coming the other way. And the road's not a big road. It's a pretty small 2-lane road. So if you like driving, to me, I've driven all over the world, and it's probably my favorite road I've ever driven.
I enjoy driving it. I mean, it's a good road, but it's very, very windy. The other caution I would give is... As we were right at the northern end, just probably up into Skyline rather than down in the Blue Ridge, we were driving later in the day as it's getting closer to dusk. And I think we saw within the course of half an hour, half a dozen different deer in the middle of the road.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah, there was one day in Virginia where we saw 3 or 4 in one day, right by the road or in the road. That speed limit is there for a reason. Right. And there's not a whole lot of guardrails.
No.
So maybe keep your eye on the road. And if you want to look at the scenery, I'm guilty of that. Ooh, look at that. And meanwhile, I'm not paying attention to the curves. But as long as you take it slow, there's so much to see and so much to do. I can't imagine ever getting bored with the road.
Well, and you say there's not a lot of guardrails, but it's not like, say, driving Highway 1 in California where if there wasn't the guardrail, there's the drop off to the cliff, typically. A lot of the places, it's because of the rounded hills, you're driving the ridge line often or just below the ridge line. And I don't think I ever felt uncomfortable that, oh my gosh, I wish there was a bigger guardrail between me and Oblivion or something like that.
No, I don't think that, but it's definitely the kind of place where I personally prefer to keep my eyes on the road more than I would like as a person who likes to look at pretty things all around me. And it's tough because we did it last year in peak fall season, and you've got these dynamic shades of red and orange and yellow and green on all sides. I mean, it looked like gems hanging in the sky because the sun is shining through them. And I'm like, I really need to be paying attention to the road, not looking at the color of the leaves. But you can understand how it would be easy to get distracted because there is so much beauty.
Right.
It's unrelenting how beautiful it is.
Yeah, excellent. Where to next?
Well, it's kind of a trendy one, but really the Mabry Mill is just one of those stops on the Blue Ridge Parkway. It's the most popular, the most photographed stop on the entire Blue Ridge Parkway. It's in the southern part of Virginia. Again, it's got a historical mill. It's got a lot of outbuildings that were used. There's like a blacksmith's building. There's an old cabin. There's a moonshine still, all of which were sourced from around this area in Virginia. So there's a lot of little historical elements to it, but you've got an old mill on a pond surrounded. We just went there in the spring and it was surrounded by rhododendrons in full bloom. So you've got these ginormous pink flowers, and it's just, as a photographer and as just an appreciator of natural beauty, it's just a stunning setting. And it's got some interpretive elements so that you can learn more about the history as you walk around it. And there's a little visitor center there. And it's just very popular, so sometimes it's crowded, and it's one of those things, some people poo-poo it because of that, but I think it's a must-see. It's the kind of place you can't just stop and take a picture. You really need to spend some time and learn more about it.
Got it. And then that's at mile marker 176.
Correct.
And we're still in Virginia.
Still in Virginia. There's more and more and more. I mean, there's so many that I didn't even mention. Going back up to the top, we could do Raven's Roost, where you can stand in the edge of these rocks where there's actually some other rocks down below, so you don't feel like you're completely vulnerable, but you're looking out over just this vast expanse with rocks all around. I mean, really, you could talk about all of these overlooks. Every one of them is there for a reason. So it's hard to say. When I did it the first time, I stopped at every single overlook, every single one.
You have to have a lot of time if you're going to do that.
I know. So let's keep going south. Okay, we did the Breiniger cabin.
Yep.
I think those might be the main ones that I would recommend in Virginia. So we may want to start moving into North Carolina now.
Well, I would like to ask, have you made it to the Blue Ridge Music Center? That's one we did not make it to, but it caught my attention.
Yes, but we could not go in because they had it closed because of COVID. But we did go around the outside and saw the amphitheater where they show the concerts and things like that. But we could not go in because of COVID.
Well, and the reason I ask is when we're talking about the Blue Ridge Parkway, Blue Ridge is also a style of music that I'm rather fond of. I wouldn't say I'm an expert in Blue Ridge music, but I do enjoy it, and that's one I would like to get to in better times.
Absolutely. And that area of Virginia, as well as the northern part of North Carolina, is one of the epicenters for fiddling in the Appalachian style. And they developed their own, there's a regional style that is very specific to this small area of Virginia and North Carolina. They do have a fiddlers convention every year. I can look up the date for it, but it's very popular to do the Blue Ridge Music Center, and they do it. And then also the Alta Pass Orchard in North Carolina, which is right on the Parkway, they also have a lot of bluegrass live performances there. And both of them are known for being sort of havens for music in that area. I will let you know that where is the Fiddlers Fest. Here it is, Old Fiddlers Convention.
It's not just a Fiddlers Convention, it's an Old Fiddlers Convention.
It is. It's in Galax, Virginia, which is where the Blue Ridge Music Center is. More than 40,000 people per year. This year will be its 79th annual event on August 4th through 9th. There's camping, fun, and fiddle competitions for 6 days.
That sounds awesome.
Right?
Excellent. Well, I kind of distracted you there. You're heading down into North Carolina.
Yeah. So, North Carolina, when we get down into North Carolina, we're getting into the high country. And this, for me, is the most spectacular part of the Blue Ridge Parkway. We're around Boone and Banner Elk and Blowing Rock, three major, well, major not in terms of size, but major in terms of popularity and renowned. And there is so much to do in that area. But two of our favorite things, there's Julian Price Memorial Park, which has the Price Lake overlook. There's a lot of great trails going around the lake. There's the Boone Fork Trail. There's a waterfall. There's so much to do there, and the lake itself is just one of the most, I'm a lake person by nature, but it's just one of the prettiest lakes I've ever seen. And there's a trail that goes around Price Lake where you're just kind of going through like a tunnel of rhododendron. We did it in October, so they weren't in bloom at the time, but it still kind of feels like going through like a railroad tunnel that's formed by these massive plants. And then there's little places every so often that you can kind of move over and you're right on the shore of this gorgeous lake. There's kayaking, there's paddle boarding, there's all sorts of things you can do there. But really, if you have time to do even part of the trail around the lake at this overlook, I highly recommend it. There's also, right next door to this is Moses Cone Memorial Park, which is another park that has a lake called Bass Lake. It has some historical homes that once belonged to this guy who was the Denim King of North Carolina, very wealthy. Seriously, yeah. I mean, it's like an old style Southern plantation.
Okay.
Lots of history, tours that you can do there. We didn't get to spend but a few hours there, but it's the kind of place where you could easily spend a day hiking trails again. And both of these are within a few miles of each other. But this part of North Carolina and the Parkway, there is so much to do. It's hard to even know where to start, but you really must go to Grandfather Mountain is an absolute must. The state park is on top of the mountain, and they also have, there's a state park side. It's a little confusing. There's a state park side. There's also a paid attraction side. The paid attraction side has a mile-high swinging bridge that is very famous, where you can go across this gorge and look out over all of God's creation, and it's just absolute must see.
And for me, that would be a lookout, not down. Then,
yeah, I have a little heights thing, and I understand it's definitely nerve-wracking, but so worth it. And then right around the corner from there is a trail called Rough Ridge, where you can go at the Rough Ridge overlook and you can climb up. This is mile marker 302.8. You can climb up a fairly short hike, and you can get an amazing view of the Lynn Cove Viaduct and Grandfather Mountain, and it's just spectacular. One of the best views on the Parkway as far as I'm concerned. And then I'm trying to think what else is in that area, because there's just so much. The Grandfather Mountain overlook, the Beacon Heights overlook, so many things in that area. And there's also the towns of Banner Elk and the town of Blowing Rock are right there off the Parkway, so you can go and see the Blowing Rock, which has been in so many movies.
I don't know what the Blowing Rock is here. I'm going to plead ignorance.
Well, I am almost certain it is the oldest paid tourist attraction in North Carolina. And it is a very picturesque rock that sort of arcs up so that you can climb to the top and sort of hang out at the top and look out over everything. You're not in any real danger of falling because it's not that high up, but it gives you the feeling of being over everything. And they have a paid attraction there. There's a little bit of a history museum. There's some hiking trails, including a new one they just built right along the rim so that you can walk along and go around the rock itself. It is the attraction for which the town of Blowing Rock is named.
Okay.
And It's just off the Parkway. So there's just so much to do in that area. We've been there once already, and we're going back again later this year. And that whole area around, where were we? We were mile 290 something to 310 or so. That area is worth spending a few days in just on its own.
Okay, cool. Well, and that actually begs the question of, when we divide this up, if you were taking a week and doing the whole range, you're going to spend a night here or two. Where are your other stops? We talked about Stanton, for instance.
Asheville,
Well, sure.
Asheville,
Yeah.
Asheville. You got to spend at least a couple of nights in
Sure.
Asheville. There's so
I feel like that was a dumb question, but
yeah, we have a story on our site that has 27 waterfalls within 40 minutes of Asheville.
Okay.
27 noteworthy waterfalls, not little rinky-dink waterfalls, noteworthy. There's so much to do in Asheville. We've been there 5-6 times now, and we go back pretty much every year. So Asheville is a must stop for me. The area around Banner Elk, Blowing Rock, and Boone is a must stop for me.
Okay.
One of the places we haven't spent enough time yet, but I really want to spend more time, is Cherokee, North Carolina, which is where the Parkway basically begins. You've got Great Smoky Mountains National Park. You've got the Museum of the Cherokee Indian, which is an amazing cultural museum. You've got the, oh my gosh, I'm going to blow this pronunciation, but I think it's called the Okanalufti Visitor Center.
I've been there and I don't know how to pronounce it. Yes,
but I think it's Okanalufti.
Yeah.
But you're almost guaranteed to see elk there, wild elk. They've got a living history type attraction with old cabins and houses. They've got a visitor center that has all sorts of information around about the Parkway and the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. It's kind of the beginning of it all, and it's a place where I would love to go and spend several days. So that is an area that I would love to spend more time.
Well, and at that visitor center, because we stopped at the visitor center, we did the hike there along the river down towards the Cherokee Reservation there, which is lovely. A lot of people there are using that river area for floating, doing float trips basically in inner tubes and things. But the other thing is, if you get your national park passport stamped in that visitor center, which you all have got national park passports, right? I assume. Then you can also get a stamp for the Trail of Tears, because this is considered one of also the visitor center for one of the branches of the Trail of Tears, which commemorates the rather tragic history of what Andrew Jackson and the U.S. did to the Cherokee Native Americans in the area, forcing them off their land and out into Indian reservations in Oklahoma. Not our brightest hour.
It's something we talk about a lot on our website because it is important that we acknowledge that this land in the Blue Ridge Mountains, this is Cherokee land predominantly. And especially here in North Georgia where we live, there's a lot of landmarks to the Trail of Tears. So, yeah, I think that is what makes Cherokee special, is that Cherokee is the town of the Cherokee Nation.
Right.
And to go there and actually be able to talk to Cherokee people and learn more about their culture and their history, and that Museum of the Cherokee Indian is a great place to start.
Excellent.
These are violent criminals, so they're not going to go down easy.
ABC Tuesdays.
Let's get this done.
The Rookie is back.
We have 2 new rookies starting today.
Howdy.
Being a cop is stressful 24/7. Every year on the job is different.
And Training Day
We have a serial killer at large.
never ends.
We need an ambulance!
The Rookie. All new Tuesdays on ABC and stream on Hulu.
But the other place I was going to mention that I forgot to mention before that we spent a couple of nights and I highly recommend is a town called Linville Falls, which is near the Linville Gorge Wilderness. And the Linville Gorge, Linville Falls, there's Linville Caverns, and the Linville River, which is an amazingly beautiful river with lots of trout and just so beautiful in the fall. All of this is in one section of the Parkway. I'm trying to figure out what mile marker we're looking at, but it's one of my favorite sections.
We're around 316.
Thank you. Thank you. So that's another town that we have spent more than one night and would definitely go back to.
Well, and you mentioned Asheville, which was an obvious answer to my question. We do have another episode just on Asheville that we did just last year, I think. And you mentioned all the waterfalls around there. We got a chance to see some of those, but also known for its food scene, its brewery scene, its art scene. Very interesting place.
Yes, I love it. I wish 10 years ago, I wish I'd moved there. Now it's getting a little too big for my bankroll, but it's an amazing town. I think it's the nicest mountain town that we've been to, and definitely has a lot to offer. The thing that I think makes it so special is that so many of these huge, important landmarks on the Parkway are less than 20, 30 minutes from Asheville, like Craggy Dome and Craggy Gardens. We stayed in Asheville back in, I want to say it was April, and drove up the Parkway. We picked up, you mentioned the restaurants in Asheville. We went to the Curate Tapas restaurant and picked up a to-go meal and drove up the Parkway to the Craggy Gardens Visitor Center, plopped down our camp chairs, ate a delicious gourmet meal while we watched the sunset and the vision of the sun setting on those Blue Ridge Mountains, like we keep talking about. It's one of the best romantic evenings we've ever had. Mount Mitchell, the highest mountain east of the Mississippi, is maybe 35, 40 minutes tops from Asheville. Then you've got the Folk Art Center on the Blue Ridge Parkway, which is, to me, it's like the MoMA of folk art. It's the Southern Highland Craft Guild. The shop that it was built around has been there for like 100 years. It's the oldest continuous craft store in Appalachians. And it's basically a haven for every folk artist in the country. And they've got everything. They've got quilting, they've got wood turning, they've got furniture, they've got jewelry, they've got stained glass, you name it, they've got it. And it's just a beautiful place. If you love the art of Appalachia, it's a beautiful place to kind of immerse yourself in it for a day.
Excellent. Well, and you're also in easy day tripping range from Great Smoky Mountain National Park, especially if you want to do the drive. If you want to do camping and hiking, obviously you're going to want to stay longer. But we basically got up in the morning and drove over to the park and did from Cherokee up to Gatlinburg, stopping along all the spots there, and then found something to eat at the Lazy Hiker Brewing on our way back, and it was a very nice day.
Yeah, there's so much to do in Western North Carolina. It's funny because I've been there more than I've probably been any other place in the world, but it's a place I always look forward to going back to.
Excellent. So I got you distracted again. We got as far down as, I think, Linville? Or did we skip things there?
We skipped around. So we went from Boone, Blowing Rock, and Banner Elk down to Asheville, west to Cherokee, and then back east to Linville, because I forgot that one. So those are the four areas of North Carolina on the Parkway that I would say are worth spending at least one night, if not more.
Okay. And then in terms of other things along the Parkway, I think we left you around, I don't know.
Well, we did Craggy Gardens. Yep. Which is around 360-ish or so. There's a lot of great overlooks that are just overlooks, like the French Broad overlook, the Mount Pisgah overlook. Mount Pisgah is it's sort of iconic, and it's got the Pisgah Inn, which is one of the historic places along the Parkway. One place that is not so much about the overlook, but it's about what's adjacent to the overlook, is the Cradle of Forestry overlook at mile marker 411. For those who don't know, when Vanderbilt had the Biltmore Estate built back in the late 1800s and early 1900s, he also wanted to establish the nation's first forestry school. And the Cradle of Forestry is basically where his original forestry school was located. He also donated I don't remember the exact number, but I want to say it was over 100,000 acres of his own property that eventually created Pisgah National Forest. And so the Cradle of Forestry is where the School of Forestry in America started. It's also the birthplace of what became Pisgah National Forest. And Pisgah has so many things, it takes up a huge portion of Western North Carolina. I believe it's 500,000 acres in total, but it all started at the Cradle of Forestry. So that's a place that we really enjoyed. And very close to the Cradle of Forestry, you can also see Sliding Rock Falls and Looking Glass Falls right along that same road, which is like 2 miles off the Parkway.
Yeah, it seems like we did a couple hikes in that area, and I think every hike had falls in it.
Yeah. And then going a little further south, there's so many, so I'll just rattle them off. There's Looking Glass Rock, where you can also do the hike to Skinny Dip Falls, which is a great place to go swimming, as its name indicates. There's Graveyard Fields, which has multiple waterfalls. But that one, for me, that one gets a little crowded. So if you're going to go there, I highly recommend going early in the day. We actually passed it up on our last trip because it was just, there was no place to park.
That's Graveyard Fields?
Graveyard Fields, 418.8 is the mile marker. There's the Devil's Courthouse, which has got a hiking trail and a very stunning rock formation there. Hardy hikers may enjoy it. It was a little too much for us in the time we were there. A couple of my favorite overlooks, just in terms of sheer scenery, is Cowie Mountains overlook, which has those classic rolling hills, but it's got some evergreens on it, so no matter what time of year you go, it's got an interesting look to it. And then the Richard Balsam overlook, which, if I'm not mistaken, is the highest overlook in terms of elevation on the Parkway.
Got it.
6,053 feet. From there, you can see the Cowie Mountains, the Nantahala Mountains, and the Plot Balsams.
Got it.
Oh, can I tell you a story about Waynesville?
Sure.
So Waynesville, there is an overlook at 440.9. And I just learned, I think you know, Chris, that T-Bex was in Ireland in 2018. And after that, I went to Scotland and I was researching the origin of my family because we're Scottish. After doing all of that research, I later learned that my great uncle, General Robert Love, who fought in the Revolutionary War, is the founder of Waynesville, North Carolina. So I think knowing that personal history and knowing how my family lived in this area 200 years ago, going to these places, it felt personal. So it gave me this connection I didn't even know I had.
Interesting. My family wasn't here yet at that point.
Yeah?
We didn't come over till the 1850s.
Oh, wow. Okay, you're newbies.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think mine came over in mid-1700s from Scotland. They were part of the Ulster Scots who came from Northern
Scotch-Irish.
Ireland. Yeah, Scotch-Irish, right. So that's getting further south. And then as we get even further, to me, some of the western most overlooks aren't quite as spectacular as some of the others. But I do think that the Okanalufty River, which is the first or last, depending on which way you go, is worth doing. Thunderstruck Ridge, I remember enjoying the view, and I think Jenkins Ridge enjoying the view. But to me, those first or last ones, depending on which way you're going, are not quite as spectacular as the ones once you get up into the Asheville to Boone and Blowing Rock section.
Okay.
For me, that's really the juicy meat of the Blue Ridge Parkway.
Excellent. We're going to start to wrap this up, but before we do, what else do people need to know before they do the Blue Ridge Parkway?
My biggest piece of advice for someone driving the Blue Ridge Parkway for the first time is to do a lot of research online, because there are a lot of hiking trails, there are a lot of overlooks, there are a lot of waterfalls, there are a lot of attractions. You can't possibly do them all. So my advice is, it's okay if you want to go and wing it, but it's a lot easier to maximize your time if you actually plan it out a little bit in advance. And we've created on Blue Ridge Mountains Travel Guide some pretty extensive detailed guides, not only to individual overlooks and individual places that are particularly interesting, but also just big picture, like what are the best waterfalls? What are the best hiking trails? What are the best places you need to see if you're going to do this stretch? And just plan it out. We had spreadsheets in the car as we were going with a checklist of like everything we wanted to see. And we would check it off as we went, because we knew this was peak autumn.
Right.
And you can't do it at peak autumn every single year. So it was like, we want to make the most of it. And then we go back now, and now we're a little more relaxed and we don't plan as much. We leave a little more room for improvisation. But for that first time, I think research and planning what you want to see can really make it maximize your time.
Yeah, we didn't do as much pre-planning as we probably should have. We're just busy right up until the point that we were driving. But there are so many places you can stop that you really probably don't have the time to stop everywhere. And so it's useful to know. For us, we were also traveling with the dog, so it was what are dog-friendly trails and things like, you have to look at what you're doing. And my wife has a sore ankle, so we were looking at, well, what trails are achievable for us? We don't need the 5 miles one-way uphill trail right now. And
that's the thing, is when you're on the Parkway, there's no sign saying this is an awesome trail and it's only 1 mile and there's not a lot of inclines. They don't say that on the sign.
And we didn't say, and you might not, and you probably won't have a signal.
Right, exactly. That's true.
This is definitely one of those places that maps.me, offline maps, were very helpful.
Yeah, for sure. So it really does, because we were going through Virginia and we had no clue what was worth doing. What was most of the ones we stopped at looked like they were 5 to 6 miles, and we didn't have time for that. So planning that out in advance really saves you some headaches on the road.
Right.
And it just makes it easier to kind of relax, because you know what is a must do and what's a maybe.
Right. Well, and I think people will have to decide, do you really want to do the whole thing in one trip, or do you? I don't feel bad that we did Skyline Drive one day, a third of Blue Ridge Parkway, and then skipped the rest and went down to Asheville. I mean, I'm fine with that vacation, and I probably want to go back and do some of the rest of this later, but there's no medals for doing it all at once. Just decide what makes sense for your trip.
And that's why we couldn't go into as much depth when we were talking about the Virginia section, because Virginia, we were pressed for time, and we knew we were going to come back a few months later, which is going to be the October trip, and we're really going to stay in some of the towns so that we have more time. And that's why I say spend a night and have time to explore an area in depth and make the most of that time, because that's when you really get to dive deeper into all of the stuff there is, because there's so much.
Well, and the other thing I would say in terms of impressions from someone who just did it for the first time, or just did part of it for the first time, is it still surprises me that an area that has been settled for well over 200 years, you've got family who've lived there for that long, or at least did that long ago, how out in the middle of nowhere you are when you're in the Blue Ridge Parkway. That
it's true.
You're not seeing a lot of billboards. You're not seeing a lot of restaurants. You really have to get off the Parkway to get a lot of services. It really is just mostly a road and hikes and overlooks.
It's absolutely true.
It's amazingly unspoiled.
It's amazing, and it can be frustrating at times, but it's the best.
Gas up first thing in the morning.
Yeah, for sure.
Excellent. Brett, as we go to do some wrap-up questions, you're standing in the prettiest spot in the entire Blue Ridge Parkway. Where are you standing? What are you looking at?
For me, the single most beautiful place that I saw was, I found this little side trail right beside the Parkway that's not really marked, where you can go down and you're just slightly below the Lynn Cove Viaduct.
Okay.
And the viaduct is stretching out before you, and Grandfather Mountain is looming way high above you. And to your left is just endless rolling hills, dotted in colors that look like Fruity Pebbles. And to me, that was the moment that was just like, wow. There's no mistaking this for any other place. This is the Blue Ridge Parkway. And I think that for me was the moment that I still look at that picture and it's almost like I dreamed it. It wasn't real, because it's just such an iconic part of America. And interestingly, it took them nearly, I think, 50 years to build the Parkway.
Mm-hmm.
But the last 20 years of construction was just on that 8-mile stretch around Grandfather Mountain. True story. That section took them the longest for whatever reason. But as a result, this feat of incredible engineering is now the most iconic place on the Parkway for me.
Excellent. I have to say, you keep mentioning doing this in the fall, which looks gorgeous from the pictures I'm seeing. It's a pretty darn beautiful place on over 4th of July weekend, too.
Yes.
And not as crowded as I expected in a year when so many people are in the national parks.
You know what, man? It wasn't bad in October.
Great Smoky Mountain National Park was very busy. There was at least one overlook that we could not get to because there were so many cars. But the Parkway really wasn't.
Yeah. It wasn't bad in October. We went during the middle of the week instead of the weekend. It wasn't bad at all.
Excellent. And one thing makes you laugh and say only in the Blue Ridge Parkway.
Traffic coming to a standstill because of cyclists riding up a mountain. That's it. I mean, it's just like, what are you guys thinking? It's just crazy, but good for them.
Excellent. And if you had to summarize the Blue Ridge Parkway in 3 words, what 3 words are you going to pick?
Epic road trip.
Excellent. And if I wanted to know more about the Blue Ridge Mountains, is there any sort of travel guide that you might be able to recommend for me?
Why, yes, there is, Chris. Simply go to www.blueridgemountainestravelguide.com.
Well, that is convenient. And is there one post there that you would direct us to for the Blue Ridge Parkway in particular?
I'm not going to give you one post. I'm going to say there's a navigation bar at the top of your screen, and you'll see it says Blue Ridge Parkway. Click it and go explore, because there are so many posts there. There's guides to the overlooks and the waterfalls and the hiking trails and blah, 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 blah. Just dive in, because there's so much, and no one post is going to tell you everything you need to know. That's why we created a whole section for it.
Excellent. Our guest again has been Brent Love from the Blue Ridge Mountain Travel Guide.com, but also from GreenGlobalTravel.com, which talks about how to travel in a way that doesn't hurt the earth, if you want to put it simply. Brent, thanks so much for coming on Amateur Traveler and sharing with us your love for the Blue Ridge Parkway.
Thanks for having me, Chris. Always a pleasure.
Special thanks go out to the patrons of the show who help support the show financially. If you'd like to help support the show or just get the show earlier or without ads or do a monthly Zoom call, go to patreon.com/amateurtraveler. I got a review in Apple Podcasts that made me sad, not because it was a bad review. It was a 4-star review. It says, interesting one. I would like show notes with lists and links. Really like the way things are described, peppered with local stories and histories. Would prefer to see lists of places and links to his blog and others in the show notes. I couldn't find anything for the Slovenia episode, for example. And it made me sad because I'm hoping that this is the only person who listens to the show who doesn't know that every episode of Amateur Traveler has show notes in 2 places with a list of links to the things we've talked about. That includes this episode. One is in your podcast player. If you look at lyrics for the episode, assuming your podcast player can show you lyrics, like song lyrics, you'll find the links for everything we talked about. And then also, for every episode of The Amateur Traveler, there is a page on the website that has that information. And if you go to the website, go to amateurtraveler.com and click on podcast, they're all listed in chronological order. So if you know the number of the episode you're looking for, you can find it. Or you can go to the front page, and they're also all categorized by destination. So if you want to go find all the shows that we're doing about North Carolina, for instance, you can go to North America, US, North Carolina, and see all those shows. And with all those shows will be all the show notes. I'm hoping you all knew that, except for one person. With that, we're going to end this episode of Amateur Traveler. If you have any questions, send an email to host@amateurtraveler.com, or better yet, leave a comment on this episode at amateurtraveler.com, where you can find show notes, by the way. And thanks so much for listening.
I got to see one more cathedral. I got to sit in one